Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson. On this episode, we're lucky enough to have Melissa Bernstein. She and her husband, Doug, built Melissa and Doug, a very famous children's toy company, sold that for $950 million. She's got a great new company called Lifelines. We're going to talk about one of my favorite authors of all time, Viktor Frankl, and some of the insights she got from him. Melissa, thank you for making time for this.
It is such an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So coming from the great state of Connecticut today, where were you guys when you started Melissa and Doug?
We were exactly where we are now. We were in Connecticut. We are true nutmeggers, and I would say both our businesses have been born and bred in Connecticut, along with our children too.
That's fun. How many kids do you have?
We have 6 children.
Okay. I have 4 children, and when I told my wife that you were coming on the show, she geeked out more than any of the guests of the last 1,000 episodes. And she was like, I was like, she had this great company called Melissa and Doug. She's like, hello, every mom in the country knows who that company is. She's like, honey, don't you remember the cucumbers that you chop with the wooden knife and they're Velcros? It sounds like you're cutting it. And I was like, yeah, those are actually really great children's stories. So let's talk about being disappointed with Wall Street and deciding to do something that was more light and bringing happiness into the world, and as a 22-year-old making this kind of decision.
You know, it's funny. I was recently speaking to a bunch of college students and grad students, and the thing that always resonates with them more than anything is the fact that I started in investment banking and left this potentially lucrative career in investment banking to do my own thing, of course, with Doug. So yeah, let's talk about it. I, like many people, and I think unfortunately it hasn't changed. If anything, it's gotten even worse since I was a graduating college student. I think many of us follow the path that we believe will be the most lucrative and the most socially acceptable, which back in that day, and it hasn't changed, was investment banking and consulting. And I, being incredibly insecure and not confident in who I was and what I deserved to bring forth, followed that conventional path and went into something that didn't light me up, that wasn't a skill or a passion. And I quickly became very miserable doing it. And my boyfriend at the time, Doug, was similarly uninspired in advertising. And I became so despondent that I actually really started to have a meaning crisis. I was born with a meaning crisis. I have it continuously throughout my life. And I started to feel like there was no reason really to get out of bed each day, which was really not conducive with a fulfilling life. So we agreed that we would go away for one fateful weekend and we would not return until we had something that we wanted to invest our time and energy into that could potentially impact others.
Yeah. Can you talk about the choice to go into things like wooden toys instead of more bells and whistles and the evolution of more complicated, complex toys?
Love that question. So Doug and I are real renegades. You know, we don't ever do what is expected of us, not because we're just trying to be sort of rebel rousers, but I think because we always want the hardest path, right? The path that isn't where everyone else is clamoring, the less trodden path. And when we thought about the toys that were timeless, that were heirloom, that were the hallmark of our childhoods, they didn't have those bells and whistles. And what we believed is we coined a term during our 35 years in toys, which was open-ended play. And we truly believed that already, even in the late 1980s when we started Melissa and Doug, we believed that childhood was already being usurped through too much bells and whistles and distraction and screens calling attention. And we really had nostalgia for those open-ended playthings that were what we called 90% child and only 10% toy. And we really wanted that toy to simply be a spark to unleash the true imagination and potential in a child. So we were very much against anything that had sound and lights and batteries, and anything that couldn't simply be a conduit to unleashing a child's imagination.
Well, it was obviously very effective. Um, let's what's one of your billion-dollar success secrets? There's so many people that children's books, children's toys, things like this, and so few that are able to get the mass appeal and the scale and run a great business and the team and all these different aspects that it takes. What's one of your core principles, or one of the principles that you feel like helped you the most?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm writing a book on the heart of entrepreneurship now. So it really comes down to three things, in my opinion: passion, patience, and purpose. And which most people, especially today, don't have. It's really being curious and sort of collecting the ingredients of life experience and not really discriminating, not trying to follow things that you believe will make you successful, following things that really light you up. And that gives you a passion. Then it's having the patience to actually become sort of an expert in your area of intrigue and really like taking time to learn it and become sort of a master in that field and collect so much data and facts about it and experience doing it and learning about it that your brain can hold nothing more. It's like a sponge that's completely full. And then that gives you sort of this mission. Like, now that I understand this so well, where are the white spaces in it? Where are the areas that the problems to solve, or the gaps that I could insert myself in and create something that gives me direction in my life purpose? And I think for the most part, people, they're racing toward a finish line. They're living in the noun rather than the verb. And when we are focused on the end goal and not the journey, we create replications, we create Me Too products, and we don't create anything that's really differentiated.
I can be such a goal-focused person, and I think I can really slip into that. And one of the analogies that helped me is thinking about snowboarding, one of my first loves. And like, the point of the snowboarding is not to get to the bottom. Like, the point is not like how, like the destiny, like getting back to the snowmobile to get another ride back up. Like, the snowmobile isn't the point. The coming down is the point. And it's hard because we celebrate the results so much in the media. So often, I've given into the temptation to think that my worth and my net worth are extremely tied together, things like this. And so there are a lot of temptations for me, at least, to be so outcome oriented that I'm just like enduring life instead of actually enjoying life.
Well, there is a term for that. It was coined by a guy, Ben, I think it's Alahar, called arrival fallacy. And it's this belief that when we arrive, we will be like perfectly happy and joyful. And it's actually a complete mistruth. When we arrive, usually people who strive for arrival are unhappy to begin with. And they're looking for that sense of achievement to bring them fulfillment, when it's very much the opposite, right? It's being in the moment and enjoying the process that brings you the fulfillment, not the arrival at all. So people who suffer from arrival fallacy, they keep doing the same thing. They keep hitting the peak, and then they're at the peak and they're like, wait a second, I'm here. Like, why am I unhappy? So it's very important to understand that that's a human tendency. And the more we can revel in the process of anything we're doing and live in the verb of being, doing, experiencing, the more fulfilled and content we'll ultimately be.
Yeah. And like, I'm totally honest that it isn't all roses and puppies. You know what I mean? Like sometimes in the very early days where it's like, it's scraping the walls for two nickels to rub together. And like some of that part isn't as fun. And, like it's not like I'm Pollyanna of every bit is fun all the time or something. But I can say for myself, that message you have there really resonates with me. So, what's another aspect of the three Ps for a founder listening today?
Well, I think it's I'm a big fan of flow state, which was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, a term that he coined and one of my favorite authors. And flow state means that to stay in flow state, the challenge has to be 4% greater than your skill level. So meaning if you want to keep interested in what you're doing over a long period of time, like 35 years, which is how long Doug and I were at Melissa and Doug, you have to keep challenging yourself and you have to keep raising the bar. And that's something that I have done my whole life because I get bored. People are like, you spent 30 plus years at a company. And it's like, sort of, yes, it was the same name of the company, but we were constantly reinventing it because we would get so bored of what we were doing, which is why I was always going into new categories and new directions and pushing the limit of what could be done in manufacturing. So I think it's that when we become complacent, we basically stop living, right? We go into this and our bodies crave that. Our bodies are telling us just to stay in homeostasis. And because it's scary, right? Doing new things and jumping into unknown territories. But the truth is, that's the only way we stay passionate about what we're doing. So I would continue to, and it only happens intrinsically. So developing intrinsic motivation for what you're doing, which is why it has to be something you enjoy from the beginning. But even if you enjoy it, you have to keep pushing the boundaries of what you're doing to stay really fascinated with it.
Well, I think we need to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Jennifer Hill, who put us together here.
Yes. Love Jennifer.
But I think one of the things I was so fascinated with your story is the level of invention. How many different toys do you think you came up with over that time? And then how many actually went to market?
It's a great question. And the number isn't even known. There were so many. We say between 5 and 10,000. And we had over 5,000 toys at one time actually out in the market. However, my success rate was not high. And actually, once a Harvard Business School trained McKinsey consultant decided to calculate how often my product succeeded, and he used a 3-year period, and he calculated that my products were only successful 37% of the time. Meaning, which I found, I loved it because it meant that I failed 63% of the time and I failed more than I succeeded. And that became a talk I started to give, called I Failed to Succeed, using failed in two different ways, because I found the whole journey of success and failure and what we term as failure is actually just a part of the pathway to success. It became a really important part of my journey, maybe the most important.
Yeah. When you think about that type of volume, what are some insights on creativity and inspiration, after you've already done 4,000 to keep the passion, to keep going for the next 1,000 toys after that?
Again, part of it was to really be in the moment and to be able to say, let's make this one toy the greatest toy ever. And one of my insights was to be able to say, if this one toy is the first and only toy someone gets from our company, am I proud of this toy? Do I want this toy to represent our entire brand that we've built over all these years? And it really helped be a litmus test, because I think as I did start to create more and more, my bar did start to go down a little bit, to be honest. And there was a period when I started to look at some of the things I was creating and I was like, you know what, Melissa, this isn't as good as your early products, because now you've created thousands of toys and now, you need to to struggle a little more to come up with good ideas. And that's when I kind of kicked myself in the butt, so to speak, and said, no. You gotta wipe that slate clean, honey. And you gotta go back to that beautiful territory, that boundless, expansive white space, and make sure that it covers every core tenet of Melissa and Doug and what you believe. So I think it was challenging, but not if I got rid of the future, got rid of the past, didn't start to feel too anxious that this one toy has to be everything. And I would say a mantra to myself, which was really make this one toy the greatest toy ever.
So can we get a little bit granular? What did that look like? Did you turn your phones off and go in a room with a drawing board? Were you at a museum looking for inspiration? What did this look like in different forms?
Usually looked like taking a walk. So I believe, like many of the philosophers in the past, that no great idea was ever created without walking. So for me, what I do is I collect all the ingredients. I am a very research-based creative, and I believe that when you know everything there is to know about a category, that's when the insights bubble up. So I gather all the ingredients, and then I literally let them distill into my being and go into what I call the simmering process.
Can you explain to us what the ingredients look like for you?
Yes. So let's say, let's use Lifelines for an example. So we reinvented essential oils and the whole taxonomy around them and the way they're disseminated. We have patents already on them because I had the experience of using essential oils, and it was a very poor customer experience. So those are my main ingredients, right? I wasn't planning on creating a line of essential oils ever. I was just going through the experience, which is always what happens. So my ingredients start with personal experience, whether it was my kids playing with a toy that they found flawed in many ways, or I using a product. So that experience becomes the meat of my ingredients. Then once I have an experience that I say, this is awful, I don't know how to use these essential oils, I can't find a scent that I love, then I start to research the market. And then I say, what exists? Usually just to purchase, right? In this case, I was like, I want to purchase some oils that make me feel good and immerse my senses in delightful stimuli. And I looked on the market. Those were more ingredients. I saw what existed. I saw what everyone had done. And I said, this doesn't exist. And then when I feel like I've adequately experienced and researched what is out there, I literally, metaphorically and literally close my eyes and I say, okay, ingredients, you're all in me now. I'm going to put you all in the pot. I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm going to literally put it on low on a medium burner, maybe the back burner, depending on how complex the problem is. And I'm going to let you simmer. And I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do things that have no connection to the problem that is simmering. Actually, it's in the unconscious on the back burner. And depending on how challenging a problem it is, that defines what I do. If it's really a weighty one, like a major life problem, I can't engage in anything that's even too conscious because it's using some of my vital energy. But if it's a product, which I consider meaningless, minimal, then I think about other things. I listen to music. I'll listen to a podcast. And then within usually a few days, I get that basically the ingredients mixed together in a way that they give rise to that chef's kiss recipe. And it literally bursts from the unconscious into the conscious in seemingly what seems like an epiphany and a lightning bolt. But it's not a lightning bolt. It's actually the result of doing really hard work. And I'll get this, oh my gosh, that's it. That's what we need to do. And then I see it in my head. And that's when I start the process of, expressing it to my team and bringing it to fruition.
That's fascinating. By the way, if you're writing about that in your book or something like that,
I am.
there's a scientist who wrote a great book about this called Autopilot. I think it's Andrew Smart. Do you know this book?
I've heard it. I never read it.
Uh, it's about the default mode network and how they were putting people in fMRI machines to see what part of the brain lights up when you think about this versus that. And when they told them not to think about anything, parts of the machine were going off. They thought the machine was broken. They're like, what are you thinking about? They're like, I'm not thinking about anything. And so they thought the machine was broken and they accidentally discovered the default mode network. It's kind of like, why do we all have such good ideas in the shower or, like you said, on a walk? And it's this other part of the brain they discovered that lights up when we're not using so much of the energy and the conscious thought and the intentional. And that I love hearing your experience there.
And some call it intuition, right? But intuition is not just this woo-woo thing that comes out of nowhere. Intuition is only the result of hard work and immersing yourself in an area of intrigue so deeply that these ideas bubble up from the subconscious.
I love it. I love it so much. How big did Melissa and Doug get employee-wise before you guys sold?
Well over 1,000.
Yeah. When you think about one of the biggest struggles in growing staff, what's advice you have for other founders today of like hitting these limits and now we need to reinvent the organization. Now you hit a limit, now you need to reinvent again.
It's really hard. I would say Doug was in charge of hiring. And honestly, it was one of the hardest things we did. And once we went to sort of like a conference, and when people said we are at best 50-50 with our hires, we like breathed a sigh of relief because it's that hard to find good people. But I think one of the things we did that really helped us was hiring is incredibly superficial. It's shocking how little people do to really assess whether you're right for a role, because anybody can turn it on in an interview. And it really gives you very little data, a resume and an interview, as to whether they can handle the role. So what we started to do is anybody we were considering for pretty much any role had to come into Melissa and Doug for at least an entire day. And we literally had them sit with people doing the role. And then we role played. Like if they were in sales, we did scenarios. If they were in customer care, we did scenarios. If they were in finance, they did exercises. And they were like, what are you having me do? We had them do work as if they were in the role. And what happened was shocking. Many people who claimed to be expert finance people and had held very high roles perform poorly in actually adding up numbers and things that would be like the basis of everything they did. People who had sold in one area, like insurance, couldn't sell the way we sold, which was developing really warm, beautiful relationships, right? They were kind of like a plug and play model. They had their model, but when you had them have to be a bit more, conversational and less fixed, they couldn't do it. So I would say seeing how people processed things. Did they have a processor and were they able to think on the go and really be a bit flexible and adaptable? We were only able to see through having them in the office. Not to mention, we were able to tell them that we really work hard here. This is not like a coast area, place. If you want to sort of do other things during the day, this is not going to be the place. And we had a few people, this one employee, Rob, who we work together now, he came to Lifelines as well after Melissa and Doug. We had a few instances where we were both interviewing someone and they said they were going to the bathroom and they never came back. Because again, we would say like, this is going to be a really hard job. This is what will come with it. This is how you sacrifice. So we laugh about those things now, but it was a really good way because we didn't want to get as many people as we could. We wanted to get the right people who really wanted to come to our quirky, odd company. And because of that, our attrition rate was much lower than it would have been at other companies.
That's a great insight. I want to get to Lifelines. But before we do, what was one of the biggest business crises at Melissa and Doug, and how did you overcome it?
Well, just so everybody knows, we had a business crisis every single day. There wasn't a day that went by without some sort of crisis. And I think one of our biggest learnings after about, 15 years of crises, instead of saying, will anything bad happen this year? It was like, what will be the things that happen this year? And I would say it was everything you can imagine, but I'll just give an example. We started making larger items at one point at Melissa and Doug, going from, the smaller wooden toys and the puzzles and the arts and crafts. We started making, our first item was a big kitchen. Literally one of those kitchens that, comes with all these separate wooden pieces and you put them together and it takes a couple hours to put it together. And because we had never done this before, we didn't create packaging. Packaging you have to engineer with big complex items. Well, we didn't realize that. And we literally took all these big wooden pieces and put them together in one carton without anything separating the pieces from rubbing together on a container from Asia and in shipping. And every single kitchen got to our retail stores. It was unusable. The pieces were so scratched up that an entire shipment of kitchens, like 30,000 of them, had to be scrapped. Every customer was like, what did you send me? It can't be put together. It's just a mess. And it was terrible, actually. I mean, it was, many hundreds of thousands of dollars, our most expensive item ever, a $200 item that had to be completely scrapped. But what do you do in any crisis? You scream for about 5 minutes. And then you say, okay, how are we going to solve this? And if you're in business for the long term, which some are not, but if you're in business for the long term, you take a deep breath and you say, this is going to cost us, but how are we going to do better? So we immediately said to our customers, scrap what you have, take it off don't pay the bill, keep whatever you can if you can. And we said, how are we going to fix this? First we said, do we still want to do large items? Because clearly we weren't prepared for it. And we were like, yeah, we really do. I think this is a very good category for us. Okay, then what are we going to have to do? Hire a packaging engineer. So we hired 2. And we started from scratch. And we said, these are our pieces. How do we protect them in the package? And we created new packaging. And I'd say those large items ended up being, like many tens of millions of dollars in sales ultimately. So, it paid off. And we ended up fixing our problem, learning from it. But it was awful at the time. And we have things like that happen every single day.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I want to talk about the new business. I've been watching your other shows and other interviews you've done, and talking about some of your own personal struggles and ideas and how you got to optimism. First of all, can we talk about Viktor Frankl and reading Man's Search for Meaning and the insight you got there?
Oh my gosh. Viktor Frankl changed my life to such a degree that I am now a certified coach in his philosophy called logotherapy, healing through meaning. So truly, I am a disciple of his. And actually, I work with an existential psychotherapist, ready for this, who counseled him. So like 1 degree of separation. And I'm now a member of his existential society in Vienna. So I'm really more than just someone who read the book. I'm someone who adopted his way of thinking, and it changed my life. So I have had a meaning crisis, and I use it as an active verb. I never say I'm recovered at anything, and I don't think anyone should use a past tense. I'd say I'm a recovering, existentially depressed person who has to work really hard to make meaning every single day. And it's the hardest work of my life and what I will continue to do till the end of my life. But I guess the positive is that it is possible to make meaning. and to be a nihilist who doesn't believe there's meaning and doesn't believe that humans have the capacity to make meaning, to go from being a nihilist to an existentialist who believes that we do have the capacity to make meaning if we take responsibility for making meaning and transcend ourselves and connect to something greater. So my whole life has been now an act to transcend my small mind that can get very dark and, depressed, and connect to larger things that bring my life meaning. And that's what, Lifelines began. Everything begins, I believe, when you heal yourself, you heal the world. And, I wrote a verse when I was very young: when you heal yourself, you heal the world, as consciousness transcends single soul to all humanity and everyone ascends. So I believe that you start with yourself. And then if it's powerful enough that you are able to come out of something really challenging, then you want to share it. And that's what Lifeline started as.
And what are all the offerings now at Lifeline?
Yeah, so Lifelines is based on the premise that our senses can be that pathway to untethering from rumination, from overthinking, and entering that state of calm and joy. And I'm a ruminator, I'm a deep, deep thinker, and I can go really high into that spirituality and I can go really low just as easily. So I needed a way to untether that didn't involve meditation, which kept telling me to not think. And the more I told myself to not think, the more angry I got with myself and the more I kept thinking. So I realized on my own that my senses were this unlock. And we all have senses innate in us. So I wanted to first buy products that could unleash the power of my senses. But when I went again to use some of these products that existed, they were all flawed and they didn't give me the experience that I wanted. And I started to say, oh no, this is a problem, because I'm starting to see this line in my head. And I really don't want to start another company, because we just finally, exited our journey of 35 years. And I knew Doug was like ready to do some other stuff, but I couldn't stop it. And I feel like when a mission and again, passion for and purpose for something sort of sink their teeth into you to such an extent and won't let go, it was like, I'm not letting go. I couldn't put it to rest. So Doug and I are doing it again. This is our second venture, and I couldn't do it without him. But these are products that delight the senses. So we started with the sense of smell, and we're creating all kinds of well-being tools that become tools in your practice of grounding that help you release overthinking and become calmer and more joyful.
So yeah, what are some of the other ones?
So we have grounding stones, which are these amazing stones that you hold, that I use whenever I'm speaking or whenever I do something that's scary. It smells and it has this amazing texture. We have all kinds of diffusing elements. We have a patented flameless candle aroma diffuser that you can blow out like a real candle, even though it's not. There's no flame. We have lava pens that have this visual mesmerizing effect that ground you while where they smell beautiful simultaneously. So we have a whole writing category. We have a whole diffusion category. We have journals. We have about 80 products right now.
Wow. I really like this. My dad, unfortunately, was killed in a car accident a number of years ago, but a handful of years ago. But he really had, a tough time. He was maybe given a little more to depression or seeing the negative, like his personality trait, and he worked really hard to overcome it. But I remember him talking about things like, I wish I could remember who it was that he followed. Some of the things that helped him be more present, like just like rubbing his fingers together and saying, like, what does that feel like? And like noticing air going in and out, breathing, or just like these things that helped him be more present. I I'm a huge fan of the Arbinger Institute, like Terry Warner, and also Stoicism. I'm a really churchy guy too, but outside of faith stuff. And one of my favorite books is that Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, and which, the one chapter does start with the Viktor Frankl quote about at any moment we can choose who we're going to be going forward.
Yep.
But one of them is a quote from the guy who wrote the movie Fight Club, who you would not normally think of as like this wonderful philosopher. But he says, his name's Chuck Palahniuk, and he says, I was just listening to it this morning because I had some anxiety about some stuff where probably, spinning a few too many plates and need to be more honest and cut some things out. And he said, the trick to forgetting about the big picture is to look at everything up close.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it's so funny because it's so opposite what you normally hear. And yet, for me, that one really does well of helping me go kind of like what's important right now. There's another chapter in that book of the most winning football coach of all time, Nick Saban at, I think, Alabama, who says, like, don't worry about winning the championship. Don't worry about winning the game. Worry about what you're supposed to do in this play right now. And like, I know it's different, but I just noticed some similarities as you were talking.
No, meaning is the same thing. So meaning, there's two types of meaning. There's ultimate meaning, which is the horizon, which you never actually get to. You just get closer to. And that's like, I want to save the world. I want to win the Super Bowl. That's the thing that if you only look at the ultimate meaning, you'll become paralyzed, right? Too much to do. But then there's meaning in the moment. And meaning in the moment is, in this moment, what are the little things you need to do? And by engaging in continual meanings in the moment, you get closer to approximating the horizon.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
What are the websites or social media or places where people can learn more about Lifelines?
Oh, we're lifelines.com. And we're sold in independent specialty stores all over. We're sold on Amazon. We're sold at Target and Macy's. We have a lot of stores within stores because it's a really fun sensory experience where you get to like use your senses. And we're all using them all the time to calm ourselves. I mean, look at babies, right? They suck their thumb. They're swaddled, and when they're swaddled, they're calm. So we're doing it. We just don't realize that it's actually our superpower, our really easy way to, at whim, calm ourselves whenever we start to become untethered.
Yeah. Well, I know so many people who are extremely high achievers, and like I also know some people who need a little motivation to get off the couch in the first place. Like they could probably use some, but I think amongst the high achievers, like they got the lessons about delayed gratification, about having having the big picture in mind. But this balance, the other side of the coin, I feel like myself and a lot of my friends could use some help strengthening that other muscles of the being present, focusing on the meaning and the now as well.
And I will say about your own question about having too many plates spinning, nothing ever great was ever achieved without intense concentration and focus. So I would really just simply do a values exercise where you write down the things that, and close your eyes and really think about what is most important to me at this very moment. Like, what really do I want to leave as my legacy? And, I always think about that sort of end of life, right? When you're thinking about on your deathbed, like what will matter the most? And I do those exercises as often as I need to be able to say, this is what I want to dig into now.
Yeah. Well, this is great. Thank you for spending this time with us today.
You're so welcome. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Okay, everybody, go to lifelines.com. Bye now.